Hello, my name is Lisa Marie Price, and welcome to the final video for Group 2 and our Mad Catter website. This milestone, I played a hand in the logging library and in getting the request and response IDs to be able to be communicated across the whole application, which means from the client side all the way to the back services and then right back into the client side. To start with, we're going to build the request ID. Since our project is essentially an Angular project on the client side, I created a request service so that the other services, which is where we have our HTTP calls, will be able to use the function that it is in the request service. So here it is. We take in the user email and then we generate a date, and then the combination of them two is our request ID. Therefore, it will be different every time a request is called because the time changes. You can see here in the schedule service, we require the request service so that a request ID can be generated. And then, since this is a post, it will get put in the body of the post. You can see here in a get, it does not get put in the body. We put it and pass it as a parameter, and that's how we do it throughout the rest of our client side. Next, the thing that I had a hand in would be our logging library. It is just one simple function that can get called to create a log. So this function needs a sending service, a route name, a request ID, a response ID, and an outcome. We create the date and time inside the function, and then it uses Axios to post it to the log service. This library is included in all of our services and is included in the front side of our application. And that is all that I'm going to explain for our 5th milestone. I'll hand it off to my other group members.
Hello, this is Jaron Emert with Cat Hats, and I will be reviewing my additions for Milestone 5. In Milestone 5, I started out by adding the log service to the Docker Compose. I also did a log collection and added that to our database. I went through the post route and added a log service to test through the curl first. Once I had it working through curl, then I modified all the services to allow access control for multiple destinations. The first thing I noticed when adding an additional call to an additional port service was that Google Chrome or Firefox would not allow that. It would allow the first call to go through, not the second. So I had to modify the services to allow 2 calls. Then I updated how the logging library was being imported in from the front end. It wasn't communicating properly, so I had to look up how to add that in properly. Now, on the second step here, I did more refactoring. I cleaned up unused functions and variables, and then I finally added the logging library function call to all the front and back end routes, which I'll show you here. This is all the times that we're going to create a call to our logging library, which is here. The logging library was created by Lisa, and in my implementation of the logging library, I'm going to show you its start to finish by using one function through our scheduling service, and that'll be the add schedule. So in the front end, we're calling our create log, and we're going to pass it the 5 variables that it needs from the front side, which is the first ascending service. Right now I'm just calling the sending service as a constant because it's called multiple times in this file as schedule.service.ts. The route, which is going to be the returned route here at schedule, and just a few variables to help us understand what's actually being put into that call. The request ID is actually a function that is created by called to the create request ID function that is comprised of the login ID and actually the date stamp, the time and date stamp. The 4th variable is the response ID, which is not available at this point in the call. And then we call for the outcome. The outcome doesn't necessarily have an outcome. So on the start of this call, we're going to call sending service, and then we're going to add a string, which is add schedule, which is the actual call to the function, and what its current outcome is, which is just being called. So it moves from here, and it goes into our index, and it comes over here to this post request. Now on this post request, the only thing that's modified here is just adding in this create log function, and then the same variables are being passed in that is pulled from the request side. And whenever we get to the end of this response, if the results are good, then we're going to change the variables a little bit from here to here. As you can see now, the sending service is being changed, and the sending service is a constant that is here, which is just the file type and name. And in the API add schedule function call, we're keeping the route the same. Request ID is the same. We don't have, we do have a response ID now, which is actually a call to a function here, which is just a simple randomized number added to the request ID. And then the same thing from above, instead of saying called is the outcome, this is schedule added from the original. We also changed this from the original function, which was add schedule, to app.post. If we have a failure, and the variables are just going to be a little bit different, the response ID is still going to be the same. The app post is going to still be the same, but the schedule not added is going to be the outcome message. And that is going to be what gets sent back to the sending service. And I'll show you this in real time. So we'll go through this. I'm going to go in as if I was a new user. I'm actually going to register as a new user. I'm going to go through these as M5 for Milestone 5 as my user information. And I'm going to create an account. And I'm going to go in and log in for the request. And now I'm going to be logged in. I'm going to go to the catalog, and I'm just going to add a random cat hat. And then I want to schedule this to be shipped on Christmas Day. And I'm going to schedule that shipment. So now that it's been added in, let's go see those logs. It's going to take me just a moment to get to the end of the log, because every single call that we have is sending 3 or 4 different logs to this, so it's getting quite large over time. And I will hopefully speed up this part of the video. All right, so for our first call, we have add schedule, and this is from the front end, and the request ID, it's going to be, like I said, the username and then the date. And it's going to show you where it's coming from, which is the front end, and it's a post request, and it's called. From that point, we can look through, and we can just look for this timestamp here, 10/5/3/25, and we can see that the app post delete cart, that's not the one we want. Here's the one that we want right here. You can see that add schedule function is being called from the scheduling index, and this is the function's called, and schedule has been added, and then we have a response ID. So that was a successful send and receive, and that is how our log service works. Alongside all this, there's other functions that are being called with that one click of a button. You can see that we're calling a function called delete all, which goes to the user index, and it deletes the cart, and we're using the same request ID, same response ID here. So you can see that on one button click, we're doing more than just one thing. And that is the same thing across the board. And now I will pass it on to my other teammates.
Hello, this is Inu No. I'll be discussing my contributions to begin with. I set up a simple log service endpoint that had a log schema to handle these variables. I also went ahead and updated our README file with the information on how to access logs. And we'll first start with looking at viewing logs for a particular service. For this demo, I'll be taking a look at logs for catalog.service.ts. I'll go over here and we'll go ahead and paste that link. We'll go ahead and change this. That loads all of the logs associated with the catalog service. We'll next look at viewing logs by a particular date. This is the date format required to view the logs. If we go ahead and put in the correct date format, it loads all of the logs that were generated on that date. And then next we'll look at retrieving logs by a particular request ID. This is the appropriate request ID format with %20 in as spaces, what one of the request IDs formatted with the correct spacing it looks like, and this is the URL link that would lead you there, and I'm going to replace this request ID with an appropriately formatted request ID. I wouldn't have figured out this %20 for the spacings if it weren't for Lisa, and that'll pull up the correctly associated log that has that request ID. We'll do the same for the response ID, and this will pull up the associated log that was generated with that response ID. Creating those GET requests from the URL to the log service is the end of my contributions for Milestone 5. Thanks for watching.